they may hear things you don't want them to hear. All right? Right? Yes. Yes. Okay. You ready to go? Okay. Okay, we're going. All right. My name is Rick Smith, and usually I start off by giving a couple announcements about other things that are related to my lecture, only because they're important later on. One thing I want to bring to your attention, which relates to this lecture in a big way, is a friend of mine by the name of George Haas has written a new book. It came out towards the end of 2005. It's called the Cydonia Codex. It's in the syllabus, which is why a lot of things I'll mention are already listed in the syllabus. If it's not, I'll tell you. It's extremely important that you read a book like that because it deals with the direct connection between what's referred to as the geoglyphs on Mars and the geoglyphs and cultural icons of Mesoamerica, that being South America, Mayan, Incan, and Aztec, and Olmec. The connection being that what he refers to as Olmecs, he identified with me as what I was referring to as the Moorish legacy. Okay? The Cydonia Codex is a big key to understanding the relationship between Mars and Earth. Both he and I had agreed that one of the biggest reasons that NASA keeps burying this stuff, that there's hundreds of geoglyphs out there. I'm sure you've heard of Richard Hoagland, but what he had done would be seen as juvenile compared to what George Haas and William Saunders have done with the Cydonia Codex. It's 10 years worth of research. And it goes far above or beyond what now would be just juvenile shenanigans with what's referred to as the face on Mars. The stuff they get into relates to the people of color and hue here on Earth, the Mesoamerican cultures of South America, who, of course, came from the Olmecs of Africa. And he and I were talking, and one of those geoglyphs is the image of a primate with Negroid-like features and the headdress of an Egyptian. And there's no way in hell that white NASA is going to let that get out to the general mainstream public because you'd be admitting too much, okay? That just gives you a real, just a glimpse at what we're going to get into. About myself, I was just talking to someone over here, but I'll just go over a few things. The way we'll do the lecture here is that I'll give a brief introduction to myself. Overview of experiences, what brought us to this understanding, mentors and inspirations, and the missing piece. Then I'll explain how the lecture is structured. We'll get through that in hopefully about 15 minutes because there is a limited amount of time to this tonight, and it's kind of like 5 hours of information packed into 2 hours, all right? My first awakening came at the age of 21, and in that awakening, I was shown everything that had happened before, from childhood on up to the age of 21, and everything that would be happening with me into the near future, okay? During that time, what was happening was, now I can say this, I'm 36 years old, I have some basis to go from. I've looked back over time and realized that there's been a pattern every 10 years on the 11th year, and what I mean by that is that it wasn't just something that took place at the age of 21. 10 years before that, at the age of 11, there was also something else that took place. My mother and I together, viewing this from the perspective of being a generational phenomena, my mother and I both witnessed our very first bona fide UFO experience. Then at the age of 21, I have this extraterrestrial awakening. The significance of that is that at that point, the entity that I refer to in my book as Mother, and I also refer to her as the crone, had came to me, and at that point in time, it just so happens to coincide with the fact that I was deciding to go back to school at SUNY Old Westbury to refocus my efforts more so on fine art instead of commercial art, and that's where I ended up finding myself, but in finding myself, people don't seem to realize when I say that there's a lot more behind that. In finding myself, it coincides with the extraterrestrial experience, with the crone coming and explaining a few things to me about what had been going on, not only with me, but with my family in general. And this is when it was made aware to me that this not only it wasn't just about me, although it was culminating with me. It had to do with my mother and my grandmother, and maybe even back further than that. And this is how it becomes a generational thing in my family. Some people have asked, in reference to the feminine goddess energy, why would it be passed on to a man if the tradition was grandmother to mother, shouldn't have been to daughter? There were no girls in my family. My whole generation of kids were all boys. But as we go along in this lecture, I think you realize why the mantle of responsibility was passed on to a white Caucasian male who has a lot more power with his voice than anybody else because of the racist mentality of the issues we're dealing with. Okay? And the pattern continued. In the introduction of my book, I actually talk about the most recent part of that pattern or cycle came yet another 10 years after age of 21 at 31. So you figure 11, 21, 31. At the age of 31, I was going through a very difficult trial and tribulation in my life personally, okay? And it had to do with someone else who was also equally involved with this with me, someone I refer to in the book as Ella Mermaid. There were issues going on there at a time that was almost like baptism by fire, okay? And by the time the year 2001 came along, she had to go her way, I had to go mine. There were two different things taking place there, and we couldn't stay together anymore. That brought about a different kind of an awakening, and it's around this it's around this time that I end up having another extraterrestrial experience where an entity associated with the crone ends up coming to me and says, you know, grabs me by the arm and says, "What the hell are you waiting for? Get going." Okay. It's from my early 30s on, in the last 6 years, that my focus on the paranormal, where I was in my 20s, you know, was one thing. Where I am now in my 30s is much different. In fact, what I talk about now, I never would have understood really 10 years ago. I probably would have gotten it, but never would have understood the significance. Here I am now at the age of 36, and what has culminated over the last 5 years since the age of 31 is that I've gone in a direction that has a much more solid foundation to it. And what I mean by that is that the abduction phenomena by itself, Freemasonry by itself, doesn't work. And this is why you get these asshole white academics who get away with saying, oh, that doesn't exist. Well, that's funny, because if I ask members who represent the other 70% of the population, that people of color and you, also known as the sun-kissed people of Earth, I seem to get a different answer, okay? So you got 70% of the planet, blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, Asians, okay? Anyone who's 7 shades darker than me, giving me one answer, and you've got this other elite 30%, Caucasian pale skin, saying something completely different, going against the grain of truth that represents the majority. So I was getting to a certain point where about 2 years ago, Peter Moon and I hooked up again. I'd known Peter Moon since 1994. But around 2004, we had hooked up again, and he knew intuitively where I was going. As a matter of fact, he turns out to be one of my mentors. He ends up walking out to me at one of his meetings, hands me this giant book. It's about yay thick and square like this, okay? It's in the syllabus. I do recommend you take the time to study it. I'm about 1/3 of the way through it, and I'm still reading it because it's got little tiny type like this going down every page. But he sends it to me, and I look at it, and it says, "The Biography of Noble Drew Ali." He says, "I know about this." He says, "I've been involved in getting to know the Moorish legacy." He says, "But I have not read this." He says, "This is for you." And he just gives it to me. I said, "Well, what do you want for it?" I mean, the book is about $100. He says, "I don't want anything for it." He says, "This is what you need." to go the rest of the way. And I said, okay. I start reading it. It's written by Elihu Pleasant Bay, and from what I understand through Peter Moon, he's recently spoken to the author, Pleasant Bay, and he definitely wants to talk to me and get in touch with me because he's never heard of a white guy getting out there and talking about this stuff. So this is like an enigma and an anomaly to him as well. But it was bound to happen at some point. Okay? So at one point, as far as this of course helped formulate a better structure to doing these kind of lectures. And of course, during the time frame of my experiences with the crone, one of the things that she had taught me, we had, these were like educational paranormal experiences. This is why I have a hard time associating with what's referred to customarily as the abduction phenomena. A lot of those issues, people, they have a victim complex, and that wasn't me. So early on, even in my 20s, I felt like there was something different about me that didn't exactly fit. These people feel like they've been raked over hot coals. I feel like I'm Superman. So there's something going on here. One of the things that the crone had burned into me was that she would not always be there. Things would happen. She would have to make a major sacrifice and decide what side she was on finally. Because, of course, she's part of this extraterrestrial council, and as with everything, there's good and bad on any council. And they were looking for an excuse to label her as a traitor, treasonous, because she had the stench of humanity on her because she decided to side with human beings. And the crone is what you might refer to as one of the praying mantis types, an ancient healer, okay? Been around since, time immemorial, very ancient race. There's only a few of them left. So, yeah, it's very tall, about, 9 feet over me, okay? But one of the things she says is, since I will not always be here for you, she says, you will come across others, mentors of your own kind, and she says, you will listen to them, men and women, and she says, they will teach you the things you need to know to fill in the gaps so that you can go the rest of the way. That was the other major realization that came in the early 30s, was that a lot of these mentors and teachers, a lot of them were white, but they were getting information from people who were all of color and hue. And that was another realization, too. It was like, where were they getting the information from? Okay? With that in mind, I can tell you why the lecture is structured the way it is, what it says on the syllabus, history, health, and wealth. Okay? The reason I labeled it, called it that, is because those are the three. That's the holy trinity of a true democracy, which, of course, we do not have, which is why I'm talking about it. And you can envision it as 3 major volumes on the shelf of a library, history, health, and wealth, okay? In which case you would need bookends to hold up those volumes, and in this case, the bookends I'm referring to would be linguistics and economics, okay? One person asked me about at the end of September of last year, I was up in Yonkers. Someone asked me, can you tell us about, what's the deal with the reptilian issue? I said, if you want to understand that thing, okay, that whole issue with abduction phenomena and reptilian contact, you must first learn about real estate investing. I said, there is nothing that you can learn in a vacuum. I said, the only way to truly understand what's going on with the abduction phenomena is to understand economics. And the only way to learn about economics is to learn about real estate investing, because that is the backbone of the economic structure on this planet, global real estate investing, okay? Investing in tradable commodities. There are 2 concepts I want you to keep in mind through everything I talk about. Flesh and bone, the investment in humanity, versus wood and stone, the investment in the tradable commodities and the real estate that humanity lives on, okay? And this is the 2 feuding interests. Some others would say, benevolent factions versus malevolent factions. This, of course, leads to the title of the book, Legions of Light, Armies of Darkness, Flesh and Bone versus Wood and Stone, okay? So this is, history, health, and wealth. the way the lecture is done, and granted, if I get through the history section, I'll consider it a success. There's stuff from the health and wealth part of the lecture that I'll just intersperse throughout as background info. We may not get to that part of it. Like I said, there's a lot to talk about just as the history part. And even though I call it history, health, and wealth, the real vision you should have in your mind is that the history is used as the foundation, and the health and wealth issues are then built on top of that, okay? So we don't necessarily have to get to those things, although they are key components to understanding history in a repetitive, pattern-like cycle. As the old phrase goes, you know, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it over and over. Mark Twain said some kind of variation like that. Let's see. The two aspects of the lecture to keep in mind is one of my mentors, his name is Phil Sparks, he deals a lot with the Hollow Earth stuff. He heard me talking one day. He says, come here. He says, you have, much the same way that Peter Moon did. He says, come here, I have to show you something. You need to know about this. He ends up exposing me to the Robert Morning Sky cosmology. And when I start talking about it, it's going to sound like I'm talking about the Zecharia Sitchin cosmology. Okay? The big difference is Robert Morning Sky, who of course is a Native American from the Hopi tribe, Southwest America, his makes a hell of a lot more sense, and it's coming from a person of color and hue. And the reason his makes more sense is because it approaches the issue from the perspective of a C corporation, real estate investing, tradable commodities, and the structure of economics therein. Okay? In other words, feudalism. Whereas, even though I love Zecharia Sitchin, problem is he comes at it from the perspective of a Judeo-Christian perspective. You can't approach the damn thing like that because it'll be skewed off in the wrong direction, okay? I have no respect for Christianity to begin with. It's useless. It's a white man's religion. It was never meant for people of color and hue. I feel bad for black Christians because they're in for a sad awakening, all right? In fact, get the hell out now because because when I'm done decimating Christianity, you're going to be running back to Egypt and Islam for solace, okay? Anyway, Robert Morning Sky cosmology and the Temple of Solomon history, Noble Drew Ali, all right? Before I dump it, let me just make sure. Okay, and as an extension of the lecture, in 2005, when I was down in New Jersey talking at the Earth Mysteries Conference with Pat Marcatilio, there was this little old lady sitting in the front row, and she was feverishly trying to keep up because I was rattling off stuff left and right. And at the end of the lecture, she walked up to me and politely asked me, she says, next time you do this, she says, could you put together something and hand it out? And of course, at that time, it gave me the idea, okay, I can't be everywhere at once, but I can hand out something that can go everywhere at once. And that's when the creation of the syllabus came into existence. The syllabus is not for shits and giggles, it's for you, okay? I don't just do it for my health. The damn thing is 15 pages long. It takes time to staple that shit together, okay? So that's for you guys. It's free. People look at me like I'm nuts. Why don't you charge money for it? I sell the book for 12 bucks. Who cares? So the syllabus is extremely important because it represents my footprints in the sand. Wherever I leave off, whatever we don't get to cover, and whenever I'm not there, you've got that to go with. So you can follow in my footsteps. It's me on paper, okay? So that you don't need me. After this, okay, you can go your own way, all right? So that's the point of it. And the syllabus is always evolving and growing over time. The syllabus is always available in its updated, newest format from the website, ufoteacher.com. There's a direct PDF link right on the main splash page. You can always go there and get it or recommend it to someone else. If you don't have a copy on hand, just say, oh, go there. Go to the website, download the PDF, print it out yourself. Voila. And that's how you can spread it around the world as well without me, okay? Because I won't be here forever either, but the syllabus will, okay? So from that, we get into the very essence and the conceptual understanding of the lecture. When I had my first awakening at the age of 21, and then later on it followed through at the age of 31, what was happening along the way was this manufactured, fabricated thing called the ego was being shattered in me. By the time I reached the age of 31, it was completely shattered, destroyed, split down the middle. What I'm about to say is going to sound like I'm talking about Freudian psychoanalysis, but I'm not endorsing that. I just need a place to begin to explain it to you guys, that's all. When it got split, of course, what did it split into? The superego and the id, okay? What that really means is that from id, ego, and superego, you get self, soul, and spirit, okay? That's the metaphysical equivalent, all right? The next level you would go to of significance would be understanding the self, of course, is the flesh, the soul, and then the spirit. What this relates to in Gnosticism and numerology is the idea of the numbers 666, 777, and 888, okay? Now, one of the biggest misunderstandings throughout history is that you get these nut jobs, once again, white Christians, who say, oh, 666, the work of the devil. And there's a reason why they say that is because Christianity is a pulpit of propaganda for Freemasonry, white Freemasons, all right? So they don't want you waking up to anything, and I'm telling you, what I am telling you is forbidden. This is why my head is wanted on a silver platter, because I'm not supposed to be talking to you about this stuff. But the thing is, 666 is the beast. But the question was, and the question that nobody ever bothered to ask was, who the hell is the beast? Okay? The beast is the man. You, me, the next door neighbor. That is the beast. And the beast is the slave, henceforth the consumer slave. Another concept, like I said before, flesh and bone versus wood and stone, another concept to keep in the back of your mind. There are two kinds of people in the world. And you need to decide what side of the playing field you're on. And those two kinds of people are consumer slave or master investor. All right, this relates to the symbolism here. I use the term master investor. It comes straight out of the real estate arena and economics, but it can be used as a metaphor for anything. You could be a master investor at anything. Spirituality, economics, history, religion, ufology, it doesn't matter what you want to relate it to. The point is that the number 666 is man, as the beast, the consumer slave. 777 in between represents transcendence, the trials of life. That path that you go on to stop thinking like a consumer slave and move into the mentality of a master investor. Which, of course, leads you to 888, infinity, Godhood. This is what the number 8 represents, infinity in the first place. It is the symbol for infinity. Also known as Jumachu or Jumachi, it is a state of completion, and that's why I use the term master investor, because once you get out of the rut of thinking like a consumer slave or being in the rat race, you start thinking like a master investor, you get on the fast track, and that fast track could be anything. It could be money, could be knowledge, okay? It could be traveling, could be visionary, philosopher, okay? Someone like me going on the warpath. From that level of understanding, you get into the area of philosophy and free association, which would be exploration, utilization, and revelation. This is circular thought, because every time you get to the level of revelation, you're back to more questions again, and you're re-exploring. This is also known as the power of creation for artists and gods, okay? From exploration and utilization and revelation, you get into, now, of course, the symbolism of the lecture itself, history, health, and wealth. All right. Now, there's always going to be adversarial linchpins to understanding why understanding why these symbolisms exist at all in this layered understanding. Those linchpins, the things that you would have to knock down like a domino effect in order to get to the truth. For history, it would be Repto-Syrian fascism. And I'll explain that term. Extraterrestrial intervention and Freemasonry. For health and wellness, it would be an invasion of the body, mind, and spirit, which is also known as the Temple of Solomon, okay? And this, of course, leads right to the abduction phenomena, which is a rape and molestation of the Temple of Solomon, your body, polluting the body, pharmaceutical multinationals poisoning the gene pool and the bloodstream of the family of man, people of color and hue, okay? Keeping the beast asleep. Remember, we're all brainwashed with the idea that the beast is some exterior entity or prince of darkness, okay? The beast is within the self, and that's the thing you need to conquer, because that'll always be your worst enemy, the reflection you see in the mirror. In terms of health and wellness, body, mind, and spirit, abduction phenomena, the cancer industry. When I talk about the health issues, the ultimate linchpin is to topple and destroy the cancer industry. I don't care what disease you have. It could be anything from AIDS to Alzheimer's, diabetes, arthritis, Hodgkin's disease, I don't care, Ebola. The first and most important thing to kill off is the cancer industry. Because once you crack that baby wide open, everything else falls into place, okay? This is the biggest money-making, multi-billion-dollar gambit, okay? And there are very effective, healthy, alternative ways of permanently destroying cancer in your own body without hacking off limbs and ripping out lungs and turning the body into a chunk of meat that isn't even worth keeping alive anyway. At that point, you might as well just put a gun to your head and pull the trigger. As far as wealth and money, the linchpins, of course, now, real estate investing, which is a good thing. I'm not painting it as a bad thing, but it's where all the power and knowledge is, okay? And then we get into, the bad stuff. Economic slavery, Internal Revenue Service, which is the ultimate linchpin there, the domino effect, just like the cancer industry. Remember, the IRS is an external corporate entity hired by the United States government. So you're being controlled by an external corporation, which of course goes with the flow of Reptosarian fascism and Freemasonry anyway. Okay. The rest of it is broken down into the sections of the lecture itself, history, health, and wealth, plus other additional sections towards the back, linguistics, the dating game. I've started that section to put in key dates that you guys should remember. I put words in the linguistic section to remind you of the things we'll be talking about today so that you don't forget, okay? And these areas are always being updated, all right? Now, what I want to start off with is I'm going to write things on the board on two sides. I'm going to try and do it that way. And we'll be talking about terminology, where words come from, words we take advantage of, take for granted every day, angel, demon, shadow, God, stuff like that, where they actually come from. And you'll be surprised to realize that most of the words that you take for granted every day in that particular sense all came from an extraterrestrial source, an extraterrestrial dialect, okay? But aside from that, what I'll do is kind of like split things into two on either side of the board. This side will be symbolisms relating to the Moorish legacy. This side will be symbolisms relating to the Masonic agenda, okay? In fact, I will do that right now. Moorish legacy and Masonic agenda. I have to tell you guys, I'm in my glory tonight. I actually have a board to draw on Masonic. I never get that. I have to always wing these things from the hip, and hope I get it right. Which is another reason why I have the syllabus, because it serves as a traveling chalkboard. Okay. So how did all this stuff start? Well, in terms of the cosmology of it all and how it got to the point, the concept being flesh and bone versus wood and stone, or in terms of the Moorish legacy, the lamp of illumination versus the iron hand of oppression. Okay? Lamp of illumination versus iron hand of oppression. Flesh and bone, wood and stone. Okay? some time ago, which is an understatement, you guys will realize I'm horrible with dates. Do not ask me to date something. You'll have to figure that out yourself. I like chronology, but I do not like dating because our dating system sucks anyway. And when we try to date things, this is when we get into screaming matches because someone's dating system wasn't correct in the first place. So how the hell can you place dates on something? I can use a vagary of like 500,000 years ago to 76 billion years ago, but you know, who can relate to that? And if you can't relate to it, then why the hell bother asking? Okay? I'm lucky if I can remember 10 years ago, all right? But the situation was this. There was a kingdom called the Aryans, okay? And the kings, spelled like this, Aryans, okay? Aryan, singular. The kings wanted to expand the empire, okay? Now you're going to use, I have to, in terms of linguistics right off the bat, okay? I'm going to tell you two terms that come from this. Can you guys see one already? Aryan, okay. That one will go down here. Aryan, as in Aryan super race. And you're going to notice that there's always, with these bastards, there's always a favoritism towards the pale skin, okay? All right? Aryan. And up here, Orion. This is where the term Orion comes from. I had to bring that up now because I'm going to use the phrase Orion Empire, and you needed to know that I'm really talking about the Aryan Empire, okay? This is where scientists get the word Orion, constellation, which doesn't come from science. It comes from Native Americans and Native Africans, okay? All right? Just look into the Dogon tribe, all right? So science does not get this stuff by itself. It goes to people of color and hue and then claims it as its own, all right? The Orion Empire, which is already big enough, wanted to expand its borders some more. So they start pushing outward, and the kings are happy with how far it goes, okay? And after a while, you know, after a while, they're pretty happy with what they've done, okay? But the thing was, along the way, they started teaching it to the women, the queens, okay? Now, the queens, got to remember, you know, we're talking about the female side of the species. In any case, the queens got a taste for this, okay? And it turned out they really liked doing this whole expanding the empire and running the operation type thing. And they realized they could do it even better than the kings because the kings got, you know, they figured, oh, we have enough, who cares? The queens got hungry and wanted to go further and further, okay? This is interesting in terms of, once again, the corporate structure. Keep it in the back of your mind. You'll notice in corporate America, there's this one white chairman, CEO at the top, and the people looking through the glass ceiling are a whole bunch of female VPs surrounding him. And the reason he surrounds himself with female VPs is because the women will work twice as hard as the male VPs to accomplish what the head honcho white CEO wants. And they'll keep looking through the glass ceiling because he keeps promising them things that'll never come true. This is repeated over and over again in the Masonic structure of lodges, where you have the white Freemason and the female Masons thinking they're equal. If you go to any country club, how is it split up? The men go upstairs, the women go downstairs, okay? That country club split, I know this for a fact because I was a waiter at one of these ritzy country clubs on the North Shore of Long Island. I saw this for myself. This was during the 90s. I'm like, you know, this is, you know, we're approaching the 21st century, and these country clubs are still segregated like this because the country club mentality is the Masonic mentality, all right? This is why all the country clubs are all Christian, and in some cases Jewish, okay? Christian and Jewish country clubs, all right? You don't see any black country clubs like that or Native American country clubs. In fact, if it was Native American, the women would be on top because they're held in high regard, and they're the ones that make all the rules and the decisions. So it's only in white America that you see this ass-backwards function where women are forcibly subjugated onto their knees, all right? So in any case, the women got a taste for this, and they decided to take over the operation. The kings were like, all right, go ahead, do it. They were happy with what they had. They didn't care. So the queens take over. Now, these was an elite group of queens who really got into this, and they were called the Sata queens. Now, can you see what's going to come out of that already? Okay? Think about it. There's two things that come out of this. Being that they were such wretched bastards to begin with, you've got an ancient reference that comes out in the Jewish Torah called Satan. Okay? All right? And of course, Nazi Germany had a very close affinity with the Anunnaki, who served these guys. So from here, you get the Schutzstaffel, SS. All right? So, keep in mind, the things I've learned over the last 16 years or so makes it very difficult for me to look at the Nazi Party in black and white anymore. There are a lot of fantastic, awesome things they were trying to do, but absolute power corrupts absolutely, and it went the wrong way. It was done that way and sabotaged on purpose. All right? To their credit, the Nazis hated the Masons with a vengeance and wanted to hunt them all down. You don't do that to upper management, okay? Masons are upper management, okay? The Masons are upper management. The Nazis were middle management trying to become the new upper management. And upper management said, fuck that, okay? All right? So that's what happened to the Third Reich. Upper management stepped on them, all right? And once you understand it from that, it becomes very hard to just say, oh, well, the Nazis were all bad when there was this other hypocritical bullshit going on in the background, all right? We see that history, just jumping ahead a little bit, history repeating itself again. We're so busy pointing fingers at Nazis and saying, oh, they're all bad. Well, they're the ones that gave us our space program. If there were no Nazis, there'd be no 1969 going to the moon, okay? On top of that, because we refuse to learn from history the right way, that Nazi Party and all the bullshit that went with it has now come back in the form of neocons here. George Bush pulled the same shit that Hitler tried to pull, and in bombing the World Trade Center, they bombed upper management. Upper management once again said, fuck that, okay? And stepped on Bush, stepped on his administration. You notice all of his kingpins have been taken away from him. And now he's backed into a corner like a lame duck president, okay? And it really wasn't his, he used to, But, this is what happens, We're so busy pointing fingers at imaginary bad guys, we seem to forget the fact that the bad guys are here, okay? Power moves across the planet like a vortex, okay? Case in point, what is New York City will eventually become Hong Kong, China, okay? Power moves like a vortex, and after because the World Trade Center was the center of Western power for the Illuminati and the Western arm of power for the World Trade Organization. Going after that totally overstepped their bounds, and the neocons knew they bit off more than they could chew, okay? But I throw these things in there so that you understand the full corporate structure of what's happening on the planet and how everything repeats itself in the grand scheme of things, all right? So the Sata queens are going out there pushing out. Now, of course, through this expansion, they end up associating themselves with another empire, a younger empire, but just as vicious, hostile, and powerful. And that other younger empire was known as the Canis, okay? So you got the Canis Empire. The Orion Empire, the Canis Empire. Canis is what you refer to as Syrians, okay? From Canis, what does it look like? Two words. Canis, they were what you refer to today, if you were to see a dog walking on two legs, bipedal canines, okay? From Canis, you get canine, and you also get cannibal, okay? Now, the reason you get cannibal is not just because of the linguistic connection, but also because the Canis Empire had an elite group of warriors called the Dux, okay? So from there, you have dux. It was spelt like this, D-K, because remember, vowels are just a crutch. If you're going to learn about language, you're going to realize vowels are absent from ancient history, okay? Because remember, language comes from Sanskrit first and then is translated to written, tablets, papyrus, paper, okay? Duk, okay? They were known as, you're going to like this, they were known as the Dukes of War. This is where Shakespeare got the phrase dogs of war. From Duk, you get the term dog. They were Syrians, and this is how they can become known as the dog race. So from Duk, you get the word dog. Dogs of war, Dukes of war. And the cannibalism part, coming from the name, also came from their method of warfare, which was just to simply eat the enemy right on the battlefield. Okay? Now, if you're going to run a corporation, you can't eat the employees, okay? So the Arian, the Satar queens, went to the Canis feudal lords, once again, the ultimate form of government being feudalism everywhere. This democracy will go back to feudalism, like it or not. The Arians, trying to run an establishment here and in a relationship with them, they were feuding with each other, and they realized it's more profitable to work together, okay? What you see, the friction between these two is no different than the friction that was caused during the Civil War in this country, and the only reason the Civil War was brought to an end was because it was more economically feasible to bring it to an end. No one was making money off the war, so it was time to bring it to an end. Here, they were losing money, destroying everything in sight, laws of supply and demand. There comes to a certain point where war starts destroying the profits that you initially started the war for in the first place. Then you need to stop it. So they decided it was more profitable to work together. And this is when the Aryan Empire and the Canis Empire, the Syrians, Orion, joined forces, tentatively working together. It's not like they were hugging each other and kissing, okay? What happens is that because the Satar queens were spreading so far out, this relationship here between the younger and the older empire began what is now known today as the two-party system. This is the original two-party system right here, okay? Now, in that two-party system, somebody makes the rules and the other one carries out the dirty work. The Satar queens made the rules, passed the laws, decreed. The Canis carried out the dirty work. They were the feudal lords, okay? Feudal lords. What's interesting is that as I go along in this lecture, you will also see me interspersing references and symbolisms from the Invisible College. Art, literature, film, okay, science fiction, in a lot of cases. These feudal lords you see depicted in Stargate SG-1 or the movie Stargate, those feudal lords, okay? Here, you're talking about if you're looking for good depictions, the Satars, the reptilians, there's this great bounty hunter played a very small role in Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. Bossk, the reptilian, is standing right there next to Boba Fett. That's your reptilian, okay? Here, Dogs of War, Syrians. You ever see the movie The Howling? They stand on two legs. You see them stand up like that? That's your Syrian, okay? That's how scary it gets seeing these damn things. Imagine the bounty hunter and one of those werewolves, okay? From these feudal lords, there was, of course, where the term comes from, feuding. The Syrians being a younger empire, they also feuded amongst themselves. Why? Because they were vying for favoritism from the Satar queens, okay? The Satar queens decided to pick one over all others, and they favored him over all others. And that one that they picked was known as Anu, okay? The Syrian feudal lord, Anu, all right? Now, from Anu, since Anu was favored by them, it made it much easier for, as you see with the mafia or any kind of criminal organization, what do you do first? You want a monopoly, you eliminate the competition. But you need backing from the crime syndicate to do that. This was the crime syndicate that backed up Anu gave him carte blanche to go out and kill off all the other feudal lords, eliminating the competition. And what was he doing that for? Why was he favored? Okay, with the expansion of the empire came the discovery of this solar system, okay, in a much younger state of existence. And what made it so fantastic to discover was because, once again, concept, wood and stone, they discovered rich and valuable tradable resources within the kingdom. And when I use the term kingdom, kingdom is supposed to reference solar system, okay? When in any kind of Gnostic or religious literature, when you see the word kingdom, they're talking about solar systems, okay? And in each and every solar system, no different than real estate here on one planet, okay? In each and every solar system, in keeping with the idea of feudal structure, corporate structure, there was always one planet that's going to be used as the throne of power. In this case, it's Earth. Earth is the throne of power. This goes a hell of a long way to explaining why they are so interested in coming here to this backwater system, okay? And a lot of the naysayers and academics are like, you know, why would they come here if we're such a bunch of ignoramuses and we're only interested in tribal warfare? That's the best we can do at this point. I mean, we started off the 21st century with a bang, literally, by going and invading the Middle East. That doesn't really exactly speak well of alien contact. So, but the interest from that side of it is the tradable commodities within the entire solar system, not just this planet. But this planet is the throne of power, so it has to be given that due respect first, and this is where you get all the wars and the feuding over controlling this throne, because legally, by feudal law, when you control the throne, you control all the other commodities within that system, within that kingdom, in this case, the other planets, the other real estate, okay? This is also what made this solar system something worth fighting over, because of all the rare and rich and valuable tradable commodities that were found here. And of course, it's because of the ambition of the females that this system was found at all, okay? But them being the elitist pigs that they are, they're not going to get their hands dirty by doing the work themselves. Why? Because in this two-party system, they are upper management, they are middle management. Middle management gets stuck with the job of doing the dirty work, okay? Middle management, this is why they favored him, okay? They bloated his ego and said, you're the one we want. Meanwhile, they just wanted some lackey to do the work. So they sent him down. Now, he's King Anu, so of course he too is not going to get his hands dirty. What does he do? He sends his vicious, sadistic pig of a son called Enlil, okay? So from Anu, you get Enlil. Prince Enlil. King Anu, Prince Enlil, okay? Now, Enlil did not want to come here. But this shows you how powerful the treaties and agreements and feudal law is between these two empires, to the point where he could force his son to do this, or else you're dead, okay? When they come knocking on your door and say, you go here, you go, otherwise you get your throat slit. Enlil, under protest, came down to this system, and his job was to basically mine the tradable commodities within this solar system. He didn't want to be here. He had his own form of middle management, okay? He had, based on Anu's name, he had the Anunnaki, okay? Now, what's interesting about this is that if we can split this, but linguistically, if we can split this down the middle, all right, Anunnaki, Anu's faithful, okay? All right, because of King Anu, all right? Well, that leaves us with the second half here. Now, I can only say this just on intuition alone. I find it quite interesting that Naki, you have the Third Reich associating themselves with this cosmology as being the rightful heirs to the throne. From Naki, you get a mispronunciation, Nazi, okay? Can't prove it, but it's a strong intuition, something to think about, all right? Anu's Naki, Anu's Nazis, all right? And they talked about the Anunnaki all the time. They were very into that stuff, all right? For better or worse, they knew all about this stuff. So Enlil comes around using the Anunnaki, okay, to start digging out the rich and raw materials from the mines: coal, diamonds, gold, okay, silver, copper, nickel, all right, all that stuff. Anunnaki, though, they're like royal guards. They are elite warriors, okay? They've been busy fighting with the reptilians. Now all of a sudden they're denigrated to slave labor. This pissed them off, okay? Remember, Enlil is playing the role of upper management, Anunnaki playing the role of middle management. There's always the two-party system here, okay? Always that kind of structure. If upper management wants to remain upper management, they got to keep middle management happy. Middle management's now ready to revolt, pissed off, like, we don't have to do this slave labor. You're making us do something that is totally out of our rank, all right? So Enlil goes back to his father and says, I'm having a problem here. We're going to lose this system if we don't get this under control, because the biggest problem here is that this needs to be kept under control so that the queens don't get pissed off. And the reason you don't want the queens getting pissed off is because you got to keep the paycheck going to the queens, because if they get mad, they come down, kill everybody, game over, okay? Like I said, it wasn't profitable to keep a war going with the reptilian empire. It was profitable to work with them, all right? And Anu already had his ego inflated by being the favored feudal lord over all others. So, of course, he wasn't going to screw this around. He stepped on his son and he says, get it under control. The son says, I can't. Do something or we're going to be in big trouble. So this is when Anu sends his other children down there, Enlil's siblings, okay? Two others, brother and sister, sends down Prince Ea, okay? And sends down Ninhursag, Princess Ninhursag. This relationship here between brother and sister, okay, even though they were all siblings, he was on one side of the issue. What you see happening here is, as we go along in the discussion, is eventually you're going to realize what gives birth, the feud between him and these two gives birth to this and this, okay? That's why I had the two split up like that. Prince Ea is brought in with his sister because the two of them worked together as master geneticists. In other words, the definition of a true god, okay? And their job was to go into the biological environment of the given planet and create the perfect obedient slave from that environment, because it was realized early on that if you try bringing slaves from another system into an alien system, you have a revolt, you have a psychological snap, you have an emotional breakdown because they're in an alien environment. So you can't just import slaves from another system. It doesn't work. Slaves have to be fostered from the given indigenous environment. This is what makes them so damn valuable, because you have to put effort into genetically enhancing and modifying that raw genetic material that already exists. And when I say raw genetic material, I'm talking about primate ancestors, okay? You see this same issue repeating itself with the Philadelphia experiments. These poor dumb suckers in the Navy who were thrown on that boat, why did they lose their mind? Because they were warped into an alien environment, okay? This was not respected, and the experiment went belly up, all right? But they knew about it. They understood psychology real well. There's two other things I want you to keep in mind in terms of the Moorish legacy, okay? Eventually we'll come to these terms, but I'll put it on here now. Guerrilla warfare, in other words, the underground, and the Masonic method of warfare, which is psychological. Yeah, I can spell. Logical warfare, okay? This one usually overpowers because you have the iron hand of depression, but this one is a thorn in everyone's side, okay? So this is where you'll get this thing going on, the psychological warfare versus guerrilla warfare, all right? We'll get to how that term came into existence. So you got these two, Master Geneticists, brother and sister, okay? And they're working on creating the perfect beast. And they go through several experiments that are failures. And they're like, we're having a problem here They couldn't get the beast, because the thing is, you need to create the perfect beast, and of course this goes back to what I said before, 666, 777, 888, the beast versus godhood, consumer slave versus master investor. Here's where we get the beginning of the beast. And the beast was called the Adapa. Okay? Linguistically, look at what's in here. Adapa, that which mimics. From apa you get the word ape. Okay? Ape. Okay? As in Planet of the Apes. Which is also a very good piece of invisible college materials. Boatloads of symbolism in all of the Planet of the Apes movies. Now, what had happened was they were trying to get to this, and they were having problems. They couldn't get the damn thing to be smart enough to obey commands without being too smart to think, therefore I am. That would have pissed off Enlil, because he was the one put in charge of the operation. Okay? To make the Anunnaki happy, Prince Ea, Princess Ninhursag, their sole job was to give the Anunnaki and Enlil good, obedient slaves so that middle management would stop revolting and the paycheck would start flowing to the queens again. So they finally, the thing is, in order to get to this point, they kept experimenting. Prince Ea was at his wit's end. All of a sudden, Princess Ninhursag calls him over one day. He says, brother, come here a minute. She's got a smile on her face. She figured out something at the bottom of the test tube. She finally figured out the proper genetic formula for creating the perfect Adapa. So what does this really mean? You have this brother and sister relationship, male and female. It was a woman that created man, and it was a man who put his seal of approval on it. Okay? This ends this long, ridiculous argument, is God a man or a woman? God is both the man and the woman, represented by the yin-yang relationship, which doesn't necessarily have to do with sexual relations between men and women. It has to do with the brother and sister relationship of godhood. Okay? The power to create life from the given environment, from the raw genetic material, which was the Adapa. And what you have with the Adapa is this overgrown ape-like thing that could stand upright. That was a key thing. Why? Because if you look at our primate cousins today, they can't stand upright because the muscles in their hind quarter and in their pelvic bone won't allow them to. They can do it for maybe a couple minutes, but that's it. They don't have the muscular structure. So one of the adaptations that had to be made, or modifications, was to create the beast with the lower leg power to lift. They already had the upper body strength, which was tremendous, okay? This is why chimpanzees are so damn volatile, and you hardly see them in movies, as opposed to orangutans, which are much more docile. Chimpanzees will kill you, okay? And that was the biggest mistake that was made here, was that primate ancestor to us on the chimpanzee was chosen, okay? So not only do you get the obedient Adapa, but eventually along the way, there's that other hot-blooded essence running through that it eventually contributes to rebellion, okay? So the Anunnaki start employing the slaves, the Adapas, our primate ancestors, to go to work in the mines.